Hello everybody, welcome to the Man Alone YouTube channel, and today we're going to be reviewing Alone Against Nyarlathotep. And if you want to remember how to say Nyarlathotep, just remember a group of pepper shakers in a room recognizing that there are lots of them and saying, "We are lots of pep." Nyarlathotep. H.P. Lovecraft's Eldritch creation, a deity that is sort of the inverted Hermes, a messenger, a son of Azathoth, unique in the pantheon as one of the dark gods who walks among humans, and is remarkable for, in my teenage years, being one of the few stories in, I'm not sure if this one is from 2016. I can't find my old one that's like torn to pieces, but I had a big compendium like this, or like omnibus. And usually I did not find any of it funny. I would read it until I felt disturbed, and then I would go to sleep, and I would wonder what everyone wondered when they had nothing but dial-up internet and couldn't use the line until tomorrow to figure out if HP stood for Hewlett Packard or Hudgy Pudgy or Hot Potato or Herman Piano. And I just remember this story had me in stitches, and I couldn't remember why. And so I read it again, this is now like 25, 26 years later, and I'm wondering, am I still going to find this funny? And the answer, folks, is yes. Yes, I do. Because, like I said, Nyarlathotep, he takes human form. He's like the Eldritch Tony Robbins. He goes around, or maybe like Tony Robbins and Nikola Tesla. He'll go around and he has like these inventions, these devices that defy logic and reason. And, if you wanted to summarize every Lovecraft story, it is man is obsessed with some sort of knowledge, goes to great lengths to find that knowledge, pushes beyond the threshold of caution when people tell them, don't get that knowledge, bad knowledge. Then they get the knowledge, and it gives them like the cosmic scale of their meaninglessness, and it blows their mind, and the story ends. Which is always why it was difficult to recommend Lovecraft to my peers, because they were like used to I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream for their source of horror. And when I was like, no, it's just unsettling, they're like, oh, okay, is there a lot of blood and gore? I'm like, no, not really. And they said, okay, is there like a big twist? I'm like, no, you pretty much know where it's going. And then at the end, I guess there's a twist, but then it just ends. And they're like, okay, great. But what they didn't, and I couldn't express, and it's still a bit ineffable, is just how unsettling his writing is. This creeping dread, this sense that things are not okay. Cosmicism is about being a tiny speck, and not in that Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson feigned like sense of wonder, but more like you are dust. And the powerful things in the cosmos, if they stepped on you, not only would they not apologize, not only would they not care, they wouldn't even notice. They wouldn't even scrape you off their shoe, right? But Nyarlathotep is different. Nyarlathotep looks like a human, takes a human form, speaks our language, and goes around, and I'm not kidding, gives like motivational talks that people get drawn into, and then they just start going on tour with Nyarlathotep, like following him around, and reality starts to melt away around them. And I read this and I was like, oh, I forgot the guy in this little story, and Nyarlathotep is like more fleshed out in the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, but this like intro is just 3 pages, and the narrator of this is such a dork, and it's so funny. So it starts out really badass. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. And I love that, the audient void, right? Like this emptiness that still, for some stupid reason, is listening as if you're going to hear anything. And so this guy goes to see Nyarlathotep. And I did a little research on this just before this video, and this is quite funny, is that HP thought of this when his friend, I keep thinking of Samuel Clemens, but obviously that's Twain, Samuel Loveman, in the dream wrote him a letter and was like, dude, you got to see Nyarlathotep. He's coming to town. Like, you got to see him while his tour is coming to town. And so he's like, man, I don't want to see this guy, but if Loveman is telling me to see him, I'll go see him. And he goes outside, and there's all these people just walking towards the amphitheater or whatever to see this guy. And then he just like couldn't stop thinking about it. And so that's basically what happens in this story. This is a brief introduction, is that everybody starts saying, oh, you got to go see Nyarlathotep, which I just find so funny that like, he's like, just like really highly recommended, like touring act. And then there is this scene here, which is, I'm just going to read it. It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep. Through the stifling night and up the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on a screen, I saw hooded forms amidst ruins and yellow evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments. And I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end while shadows more grotesque than I can tell came out and squatted on the heads. So this is the part. So he's in this arena. There's like this cosmic force that's like swirling around everybody. There's little demons that are just parking on people's heads. But this dork, this dweeb who like would be the one when a magician comes, they'd say, no, you got a trap door under there. And they would like go up on stage and try to figure out what they did. That's this type of guy. And he writes, the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end, while shadows more grotesque than I can tell came out and squatted on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, this is when we were driven out. And I love this. Nyarlathotep drave us all out, put down the dizzy stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight streets. This is the part. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I could never be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. We swear to one another that the city was exactly the same and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company, the electric company, over and over again, and laughed at the queer faces we made. So this guy, he's more cold and calculated than everybody else, and he's a scientist. He wants everything can be explained by science, and he goes outside, and it's so weird that he just goes, "I'm not afraid. I can't be afraid." And it's like, if you want to know if somebody, like a really good sign that somebody's afraid, is if they have to just start hollering that they're not afraid. And so that is the backdrop of this story. Now, I don't know how much this plays into the game Alone Against Nyarlathotep, but I thought it'd be interesting to give that background and also say I have not had incredible luck with Cthulhu games. And it might be because it was such a formative part of my adolescence that I have a very high bar, but I didn't enjoy For Against the Great Old Ones. I thought I had some interesting ideas, but eventually it kind of fell short for me in the way that other 4AD have, although there is a little bit of a change in me that I'll talk about in a future video. I was never able to get into Tiny Cthulhu, which is not a solo game. And again, it just, the tiny games, there's some, I don't know. As I was looking through this before the video, I was like, I think I am really dumb, because I think that a lot of my review of some things comes down to like what it's printed on, and I just like this glossy paper I don't like. Anyways, you probably shouldn't even listen to me as a reviewer if that's the threshold I have. And then Call of Cthulhu by Chaosium, I never really got into it, and I think I've had 6th edition, this is 7th edition, and I think I was plagued by the fact that I got it too early in my tabletop like learning trajectory, and it felt a bit intimidating to me, and I didn't understand. And a lot of that is quite embarrassing because a lot of that comes down to, for whatever reason, I felt really intimidated by D100 or D percentage dice, which is what this goes on. But it was that thing, if any of you can remember back, now, if you were lucky enough to like get into this when you were really young, like tabletop, and just this stuff is like baked into your head from your friends being like, no, that's not how you do it. Like, I had to learn this all by myself. And so some of this stuff like exceeded my ability to unlock the sentences. And because there was quite a bit of density on the pages, and there were percentage points, and there were references, and there were lots of different skills, I was just like, I can't do it. And I shelved it. And so when Lee Wade reached out to me and said, you know, would you be able to review Nyarlathotep? I said, sure, I can do that. And then I got worried. And I'm going to tell you why, because I went over to DriveThruRPG, and this was not long after I had had one of my many videos where I start complaining about pricing or something like that, and saying, you know, these pricing for these games, they're getting out of hand, you know. And then I go to drive-through, and I look at Alone Against Nyarlathotep, and it's $55. And I was like, oh no. Because I'd gone for the jugular on whatever previous review that I did about like games being overpriced and like diluting us into what kind of value are we getting? Would we ever get that? And in my head, Lee Wade's solo campaign is part of the Miskatonic Repository, which is sort of like, you know, the Chaosium Call of Cthulhu cognate or like analog for, you know, Free League Workshop games or Year Zero Engine, right? It's like this open license. I'm kind of talking out of my butt right now. I don't know for sure, but I think this is correct from what I understand. And the only other one I had for that was the Solo Investigator's Handbook, which, don't get me wrong, this is actually a really good supplement that I want to use in a video. And it's really nicely made. And this certainly, I don't think that this cost too much. Let me just see here. Actually, let me look this up. Yeah, so the Solo Investigator's Handbook is $10 for the PDF, $17 for the hardcover, and $27 for both. And I think that $9.99 is a good deal for a PDF. After all, the Manalone Dragonbane solo supplement, Called to the Green, which is now, you read that right, your favorite metal copper bestseller, has had its price reduced from $10 to $9.99. Deepest apologies to everyone who bought it at 10, but I realized that 1 penny was keeping me off the top games under $10. And, you know, hey, $10, put a lot of work into it. And then I said, oh man, but, you know, I don't know how much for $55, that's tough. And this guy, Lee, he's really nice too. And I said, this is going to make it this is going to make it harder because I don't think, I can't, obviously, if it's a person who makes something, like a single person, I'm going to take great care to look at the positives, to reserve like overt. I'm not like going to dunk on them, right? I'm not going to go out of my way to be like, oh, this is junk, this is garbage, I hate this or whatever. But I do have to like maintain some credibility in reviews. I don't, like, if people provide me the physical copy of the thing, I don't charge for the review or anything, but still, I'm not stupid. I know that like providing a physical copy is a loss of that revenue. And so I certainly like getting a free physical copy to review, but I can't exchange that for like the integrity of my reviews. If everything that I get for free is just like, oh, another home run. And I just want to go on record. I want to really think about how to say this right now. I don't think $55 is enough for this book. I don't think I would be mad if Alone Against Nyarlathotep was sold for $5,500. This thing is unbelievable. It is an unbelievable work. I don't think Lee Wade should be allowed to be out there having a life. He needs to be apprehended and studied for the good of all of us, because this is not what we have here. This is 340 pages. Okay? And Lee did the writing for this, of which there are about 1,100 entries. He also did the art for it, which is incredible. It's this combination of illustrations as well as, like sort of public domain repurposed photos and stuff like that. Okay, let me put it to you like this. You know how sometimes when you see something really cool and it's like in the same lane of what you do, and you're like, damn, I wish I would have thought of that first. That's such a good idea. Darn, why didn't I think of that? Why can't I think of stuff like that? I didn't have that thought with this because my thought was, I can't ever do this. I'm too stupid. Like, there's no way that I could have done this. It requires not only the careful networking of not simple entries. These are not like other choose your own adventure sort of things where it's like you open a door, go to page 5, and then you go to page 5 and it's like, there's a room and it's got 2 other doors. How about that? Bet you didn't expect there to be another room, right? No. This game would be like, you were at a train station platform at 11:59. Do you decide to get on the train? You get pickpocketed. You want to run after that person. You want to jump across the tracks. Oh yeah, here is like a brief aside about the history of the Channel and about the railway station. There are so many options and there is so much reactivity. We talk about that thing in CRPGs or strategy sort of isometric RPGs, the like Baldur's Gate, the reactivity. Do my choices matter? And even in really good game books, a lot of times the choices don't feel like they matter because you like end up at a very similar place. But you should see the reviews. Like, some people are saying like, I played this for 40 hours and I got 7 different endings. So it is based on the Chaosium Cthulhu 7th edition, and you can build. why am I losing this word? You can drum up. Come on, what's the word? You can make your own 7 or 8 characters, or he has in the back of the book pre-mades. There's also a sort of 20-page like handouts that you got to print these. And there's 7 or 8 pre-gen characters. And so you pick one of them to be like your main investigator. And then along the way, you'll have the chance to like get other people in your party. And the possibilities for how you can play through this game are so unbelievable. And this was like the real treat for me. I learned how to play 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. Like, this was easier to learn by doing this. Like, now it's not going, it's not going to hold your hand in that respect. Like, it does expect you to understand like the basics of how skill checks or characteristic checks work in Call of Cthulhu. And, you know, changing the odds of things based on how difficult it is, like a task. There are lots of skills, so it could feel... I still do wonder if I was a little earlier in my game playing process, because, I mean, you know, look at this character sheet. That's quite overwhelming to look at, but it's really not. Like, like the fact that everyone has like one or two, or many of them have 1 or 2 other languages they speak. When's the last time you rolled a pharmacy roll, which is like a 1% difficulty if you have no specialization in that? But Lieutenant Hudson Hustle is an equine vet, so has a regular like roll under 40 for a success in that. The combat, the inventory systems, and the time system all have modifications for if you want like a harder or a longer game. And one of the biggest treats for me, which is normally something I want to throw poo-poo at, is time management system. The time management system in this game, like once it clicked for me, I was like, this is the right way to do time management. It's fun. Like, it's fun because you're going around the book and you have these entries. And I want to be careful here because, you know, this is a plot, but I can kind of show you like you go through the instructions. The instructions end on page 9. Okay. And so, you're starting on page 4, and really it's page 5. So 5 through 9, you're getting all the instructions of this. And for timekeeping, you're directed to the back of the book where there is this, look at this. How many entries are there total? There are 340 pages and 1,185 entries. How about that? How about them apples? And we'll get to that. We'll show a little bit of that. But the time system, you know, the whole thing starts on November 3rd. Let's see if I could zoom a little bit. It starts on November 3rd, I think 25. And if you want a standard game, you use a D6. If you want a longer game, you could use a D8. But let's just, for simplicity, because it's a little bit simpler, it doesn't land on 2s. You basically say you start at 5:30 p.m. and, you know, every entry, for the most part, and there'll be like specific instructions if it's different, but essentially, every block is a half an hour, and every time you turn up the dice by 1, it adds 5 minutes, right? So like 5:30, and then it'd be 5:35, 5:40, 5:45, 5:50, and I guess actually you wouldn't even put the dice on there, so maybe it would be 5:35, start at the 1, and then up to... at the beginning of the game, you don't have to worry about this as much, and I did use the D8, which will give you a bit of a longer game. But you advance through this, and then it has, when you reach certain times, it can trigger different events and you go to those entries. There's also these DAL direct access links. And that is like if you're in the Lombard house, which is a bit of like an HQ, or if you have a map, you can start to list things on your direct access list that will allow you to like skip around at your own will. Like you can go to different places. You can also go back to rooms that you went to and try to like reinvestigate them and find other stuff. That is what really makes it so immersive as playing the role of an investigator, because you have to keep track of what you're doing. You have to keep a list, but it feels like a very productive list. And this was another thing that I was really worried about before reviewing it, because I tend to feel a bit, I won't say insulted, but I feel like when I'm forced into tedium by games, I get a little resentful of that, because I start to say, you know, if I'm writing so much, I think maybe this game should have been made a little bit differently to prevent me from having to write so much. But every note feels very useful in this game, because you're creating a record that you might have to go back to. And you can also switch perspectives of who the investigator that you are sort of controlling at the time is. If your investigator dies or goes insane, you might have to wait for them to heal, and you're following it in real time. There's like temporary insanity, and then there's like complete insanity, which they really can't recover from. But, and I just playing through this, as much as I did. Now I wasn't able to do the whole thing. I played for about an hour, and I was like, this is so special. This is like an incredibly special game. And if you can only afford the PDF, which is $19, honestly, the book is like a really, really nice book. Okay. So if you have the money for that, you should spring for that. But the PDF, I think, actually navigation wise, might be easier, even because you can see it as well. Like the links are like clickable to all of the entries here, everywhere where it's underlined. And so I can only imagine what that like tree of hyperlinks looks like. But I almost think that that would be easier, because the one thing that was like, it wasn't frustrating or anything, but it was like, first of all, my mind always wants to go to the page rather than the entry. So when I would do this every time and have to remember, it'd be like, oh, if you fail this check, go to 31. I would immediately go to page 31. And then I would be like holding my finger here, and then I'd be going back and forth like that. It's not a 20 bookmark book, because you truly don't have to keep track of like where you were. I was doing that because I was trying to get like a better sense of what different types of options there might be just for the review. It throws you right into the action. You're in a train station, and it gives you choices that really define your character. Now, before I go on, I'll say the two things that I think got in the way sometimes a little bit. Okay, there was just, and again, this is a special book, but for fairness, to give a useful review, I think I would say two things. Number one, overuse of comma. I've noticed throughout my life that depending on the like second grade teacher you had that taught you about commas, can haunt you for a long time. And I think that Lee overuses commas that break up the sentence and make it into what your mind thinks is a separate clause. And now this isn't me just being like, you know, criticizing grammar or punctuation or anything like that. The point of it is it leads to a lot of clipped short sentences or long run-on sentences or sentences that I have to reread because I misplaced like the separation between subject and object, or the subject and predicate, I should say. I'll give you an example of one. On entry 122, out of the corner of your eye, comma, you see something move behind you. Fine. Turning quickly, there's nothing there. Okay. Yet, comma, you swear there was a person, comma, clad in white, comma, running away eastward, comma, toward the gateway. There was no need for half of those commas. Funny how the low light can play tricks on your eyes. It must have been the glare of the dust or the gap between the long shadows, perhaps a moth in your eyeliner. All right. This points out another issue that sometimes gets in the way. And these things get in the way. I want to be specific about this because Lee is a good writer and he's very evocative and very good at describing things. And so it's frustrating that like these things got in the way of that. Perhaps a moth in your eyeliner. I don't know if I'm wearing eyeliner, and I might not be a character that would wear eyeliner. Sometimes there would be these asides that were done by my character that were sort of forced on my character. And in those moments, it made it feel more like a book than a game or even a game book. Very early on, you're like on a train and you're looking out the window and your character thinks, what a waste all these young people's lives were in World War I. Now that's a pretty ubiquitous thought, but not everyone has that thought, and not everyone's having that thought at that time. And so I felt like sometimes I wanted to be allowed to have my own thoughts rather than have those sorts of thoughts foisted on me. Now, I don't mind when my attention is directed somewhere, or if a degree, I'm going to readjust the mic here. I don't mind if there is a degree of emotion to say like you feel strongly about this or you feel suddenly about this, but there was some characterization that was foisted on me that took me out of it a little bit because I was, as I started to develop my character and who I felt that they were, suddenly I got another thought told to me rather than allowing me to have that thought. Okay. And look, it's not a big deal. I wasn't like, eyeliner? Are you kidding me? Sergeant Major Timothy Crane would never wear eyeliner. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just, it takes me out of it a little bit because I have to then like, in the narrative in my mind, I have to take that and like snip it out and then like reclose that gap. Okay, yet, comma, another in the party seems to be staring back down the drive. Okay, they confirm that they thought they saw something too, suggesting they felt it was a woman with long flowing hair. So that's two sentences, and that could have used a comma there. And this is like, a magpie flies over your head and down the drive before landing on the gatepost. The bird, comma, a member of the corvid family, comma, looks back at you, comma, giving its distinctive, comma, clacking call. And so that is just like a little bit of it. It's a weird pacing. And, you know, if you've played a game book, you could read it in a hurry because you're really excited about what's going to happen next. And so you don't want those kind of things to slow you down. And it does. And I'll just finish this out. I'm not trying to like, humiliate anyone here, but just to illustrate my point, you can tell the black and white bird is studying you, comma, with a curious eye. These birds are known to be clever enough to count and work out little problems, comma, stopping them from accessing food. So that actually was one thing that like, that sentence confused me because of that comma. These birds are known to be clever enough to count and work out little problems, comma, stopping them from accessing food. And then I was like, oh, okay, they're able to work out problems that can stop them from accessing food. And I just felt like those things got a little bit frustrating because I was like, I don't want to slow down on that. I want to keep going. And again, I do think that he is very precise, and that is exactly the type of writing that benefits him the most in this game book. And I will say that many of you will not even notice what I've just said. But for people who are like me, who read without an internal voice, it's more like a coding, it can slow you down. And I think, though, that what I saw was somebody that could write the instructions for like how to change the propeller on a submarine, and I would be able to know how to do it. He is a gifted logistical writer, and that serves this book very well because this book is very procedural and it is very intricate web. And so if someone who was writing it was very loosey-goosey, like if I wrote this, it would be a mess because I'm more about, like creating this mental image and placing this character and using words that evoke sentiment and feeling. And Lee does do that in this book, but there is also a sort of driving forward momentum that comes from precise writing, of which he is extremely gifted at. So those are really the only two things that got in my way. I think otherwise the cleverness of the usage of the different types of checks, the options that can come up in different moments, like you'll get to something and it's like that part in a video game when you first start and you really love the game and you're looking in every chest and you're opening every door and you're making sure that you explore every house because it's early in the game and you don't want to miss that little like dagger that will help give you the edge early on because other people will pass that right up, but you're going to be thorough. And then eventually you reach this point in the game where you're like, there's just too many options. I can't do everything. And at first it's like frustrating, but then it's liberating because you're like, okay, I'm about to have a unique story. And so you have to let go of that completionist, or you have to know that if you are a completionist type person, you're going to have to play through this a couple times because this game has insane replayability. I mean, just insane. Like, you are not going to read all of these entries, and you can even see, like, I didn't even play through the whole game, but anytime you reach a map, right, that's like a DAL, and so you'll be able to he always says red, white, and blue, like you follow those sorts of those create like a page number. And you would then go to that entry, and I'm trying to I want to just visually find one of these that really opens this up, and you almost have this Eldritch moment where you behold the vastness of the options of this book. Let me find that 1 second. All right, try to keep your distance here because I don't want to spoil anything here. And I agree with Lee when he says early on, don't be pulled in by like things that look interesting. Don't read them ahead of time. So keep your eyes like squinted here. Don't look too close. But like in this one, you enter into a graveyard and you can read all of these headstones, and there is a skill check. And there is options to go north to a village, south toward the Lombard house, the headquarters. You could follow a green lane west. You can go east towards a railway line. You can look at all the headstones and investigate them individually. You can go inside the church and even throwaway options that are like very early in the book. It's like, okay, do you want to go right away or do you want to get a drink? And I was like, I would never select get a drink, but hell, let's do it. I want to go get a drink. And it opened up this whole conversation that ended up putting me on this path that I followed down. I don't even know how significantly it changed the nature of my journey, but it definitely did. And the whole like immersive investigator thing, where I think it's like the coolest, is when he uses the pictures to actually be things that you might like truly pick up and investigate. Like, here is a family tree. Of course there is maps, but there's like pieces of evidence that you have to think cleverly about, and it's not all down to a skill check. It's not all down to a combat. It is those things too, but it's really thinking about like, what choice do I want to make here? And knowing that the choice that you make is going to leave other choices behind. And my Miskatonic friends, I must say that is extremely exciting. That's extremely exciting. You don't get that in a lot of game books. You have this feeling in a lot of game books that you're just kind of, it's like when you play with a GM who skill checks you for everything, and you get the sense that you're like, I don't think it matters whether I pass or fail this skill check. It is not that for this game. There are rules on equipment. That's a good place where there are options of like, do you want to do a lot of bookkeeping, which some people might like, or do you want to keep it pretty simple, good simplified things? There's also a pulp rule of you have this luck that you can spend on like lowering your result. Again, it's a D percentage or D100 roll under. And so, if have a really high stat in something and say it's a 70, you need to roll under that to succeed. And you can spend luck points. Say you roll a 76, you can spend luck points to get you down below the roll so that you succeed. And there's this pulp rule that if an investigator is going to die from an injury, you could spend 35 luck and just like avoid all of the damage, which I think is cool to have that option, if you get really connected to your investigator. But even if you don't want to play that way, you can just sort of like immediately shift the camera focus to another investigator. Pretty early on, you're going to meet some other investigators. And I would say I do know of one of the choices I made, like I did meet a fate early on, but which again was really cool because it let me know right away like what the stakes of this were. But I'm gonna give this a big thumbs up, a big recommend. I was so surprised by this, so pleasantly surprised. It gave me a new interest in playing Call of Cthulhu and trying to understand more of how I could play that game from a solo perspective. I've made videos about like mystery and horror and why those things sometimes don't work, and this has definitely renewed my interest in that. The hardcover book feels like a college level textbook in terms of size, quality, and just the amount of every entry was like, there's nothing thrown away in this book. Every entry has something, and it's not all skill checks, right? You're gonna track your sanity and Eldritch points and your HP, and you might have to go rest, and you might have to go get medical care, and you might have to sometimes the skill checks go to your whole party or whoever's best at it, or they go to your main investigator. Sometimes you get into combat. A lot of times you want to get out of combat. You're going to pick up items. Whether you have those items are going to depend on whether or not you can do something later on. And so what I want to get at here is that I think between this and the Lich Lord, the Symbaroum one, this is the place where game books start to feel like solo role playing. You know, I think this is really the sweet spot here where these two worlds come together, because I did not feel like I was playing a choose your own adventure. There are some game books that I've tried that are quite fun on their own merits, but never do I feel like I'm playing a tabletop RPG solo. Here I did. I felt like I was playing tabletop here, and that is no easy thing. So, Lee, you put together a damn good book here. I know I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say what you are working on next. If you see this, maybe you could write it in the comments, because I'm very excited about that as well. But I'm going to give a score of, I'm going to give 91 out of 100 waffles for Alone Against, as many people would say, Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep is an awesome book, and I'm curious if anyone has played, and if you've played the PDF, and let me know how the navigation goes for the PDF. But this was definitely such a pleasant surprise, and thank God, because the dude who wrote this has to be one of the nicest people I've ever emailed with. It was like the type of nice person that's like, man, I'll never be this nice. So pick this up if you can. Let me know if you've played it. And we got a lot of awesome games coming up, a lot of awesome reviews coming up. I'm really excited now that the Dragonbane solo supplement has started to, we've gotten past that first release phase. We have a low-res version, a black and white version of it. So check that out. But please also check out this game as well. Check out all the games. Stop buying groceries. I can't say that to people. I can't say stop buying groceries. It's socially irresponsible. I'm going to get some comment.